Hi guys, George Baltakian here, commercial real estate professional in Los Angeles. Today I want to discuss the four main types of commercial real estate property and a few considerations with each if you're considering investing in commercial property. So first I want to talk about multifamily. The benefit to multifamily being people always need a place to live, so it's pretty easy to find a new tenant if you do have a vacancy, depending on your location. Also with multifamily, you have diversification in your occupancy so that if you have a vacancy, it doesn't reduce your income to zero overnight as it would with a single tenant building somewhere. So if you have a 20 unit building, for example, and you end up having a vacancy, it goes to 95% occupancy rather than zero. One thing to be aware of with multifamily is the local ordinances and local landlord tenant laws and also rent control laws. California is implementing a statewide rent control law, so that's something to be aware of when you're investing here. Next up, I want to talk about retail. Retail is very interesting. You have single tenant buildings and multiple tenant buildings, and a lot of different businesses and properties qualify as retail, right? It might include restaurants, self-storage, it might include auto-related properties and body shops, etc. But retail could be a very interesting asset class depending on the location. It can be very stable and very profitable, and you don't have to deal with a lot of the ordinances and rent control laws like with multifamily. However, there are some risks with retail, of course. A lot of people talk about the e-commerce revolution and storefronts not doing as well, but of course it always depends. There's always going to be products and services that require in-person transactions. So depending on where you're located, retail can be a very solid investment. And typically in Southern California, we see triple net leases, although there are many different lease structures within retail. Triple net basically meaning that the tenant pays their proportionate pro rata share of the owner's property taxes, insurance, and some common area maintenance charges. So that's all pre-agreed to in the lease. One trend we're seeing here is a movement towards mixed use properties, incorporating both multifamily model of apartments and retail kind of mixed together because we have a housing shortage and also some retail spaces need to be converted. Next up, I want to talk about offices. Offices can be extremely stable investments if you have a long-term good credit tenant. It could also be pretty hands-off. It is typical for some TI and build out initially when signing the lease for offices to get the tenants situated. Also, the lease structure in office most commonly is full service. One thing to be aware of is a lot of office tenants keeping some or all of their employees working from home even past the pandemic just to keep overhead low during a potential recession. So this might affect some of the leases and the stability of some office properties. However, if it's well located in an urban city, with a solid tenant, I think in the long term office will do just fine. Next up, I want to talk about industrial. Typically, industrial could be a pretty hands-off investment as well, and it doesn't require as much TI or build up front if the tenant is only planning to use it as a warehouse or a fulfillment center. And that leads me to talk about e-commerce, how it affected retail with people buying things online. However, industrial has actually seen a slight improvement due to the e-commerce revolution because more individuals using warehouse spaces and fulfillment centers, Amazon occupying all these fulfillment centers to ship products. So actually industrial has seen quite a positive outlook from that. Industrial leases can be pretty stable and long-term. Typically they're modified gross leases. However, one thing to be aware of is oftentimes it's only one or two tenants occupying the entire square footage of the space. So that poses some risk. If one of the tenants leaves, you drop to 50% occupancy or 0% occupancy pretty quickly. So that's one thing to be aware of with industrial. Another trend with industrial that's becoming more common is built to suit, where the owner has a piece of commercial land, they want to develop it as an industrial property, but they wait to find the tenant first and build it out from the ground up specifically to suit that tenant. So once again, to recap, the four main types of commercial real estate property we covered: multifamily, retail, office, and industrial, each with its own pros and cons, and definitely the quality of the property type depends on the submarket, the tenants in place, and many other factors. So the more you know about your market and the tenants, the better off you'll be when considering a purchase. This is meant to be a broad overview, so if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer all your questions in the comments below, or if you reach out to me directly with the information in the description. Please support my channel, comment, like, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.